Hello, I should start off by introducing myself. My name is Becky Wright. I'm the Executive Director of an organisation called Unions 21, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. But before, I'm going to be very transparent with you. When have I used AI? Or rather, when have myself and my team used AI to develop this presentation? So it wasn't generated using AI. I didn't ask ChatGPT to, I have a conference, I have a speech, please put something together. But we did use Claude AI to analyse our free text on the survey that we are running on trade union use of AI. We did use Opus Clip to help us select and create the videos that you're going to see today. And even though a lot of us are native English speakers, that doesn't mean that we're actually very good at spelling. So we made sure that our own English was put through a spell checker. So what is Unions 21? Well, we are an organisation that give trade unions insight and help to navigate the changes affecting them now and in the future. So our thinking is that there are lots of things in the external world around us that we have no control over us that result in the decline of trade unions. Governments, technology, climate crisis, pandemics, etc., etc. But there are things that as trade unions we actually have control over, and we try and help unions to see what decisions and what changes they can make that make them ready and fit. We are an organisation that takes no policy positions, which is both really good in one hand, because I get lots of different unions with different views, talking about what's working for them and what's not working for them. But it can be also quite a challenge, because I definitely have opinions, and I'm just not always allowed to say them. But anyway, so we do these two things. We give unions insight. That has to be really relevant and practical to the challenges that unions are facing right now. I'm not interested in a very nice academic text that gives us lots of theory. I want to know exactly, kind of like Tim's lovely video. Okay, I did this, and it resulted in this, and therefore we can do that. But we also increasingly have found that unions have come to us and said, okay, yeah, that insight's really good, but can you actually help us to put this in practice? We're either too small, we don't have a team, or we don't have the time. So we focus on trade union renewal. So as well as digitalisation and AI, we're also asking questions of unions around how they deal with the challenges of new sectors, how they're strengthening collective voice, internal democracy, which is one of the things that the intersection between AI and how we build internal democracy and how we do internal democracy, for me, is quite interesting. And also building capacity. I've been an industrial officer, a trade union officer for 25 years. I started in a small rail union, and I've worked for the UK's Confederation, and I'm really interested in this area of how do we give union staff and union workers the skills they need to be effective in their job. So a couple of years ago, maybe 2 years ago, I had 2 conversations with general secretaries that I work with quite a lot. And one of them came up to me and said, look, I'm in a maritime union and I have members going across the world. How do we make sure that we could help those members get advice wherever they are? I've heard of these things called chatbots. Should we be doing a chatbot? To which my answer at the time was, I don't know. Let's have a little think about this. I'll come back and we can experiment on a few things. I would always ask questions like this, which is, to what extent does it support you to empower your own activists and members to be able to do things for themselves? Are we giving them another service? Maybe we have a chatbot for a few bits, but then we encourage activism in another. I don't know, let's have a conversation. And that's been an ongoing conversation for 2 years. Not as, again, quick as you folks. And the other one was with a general secretary of a small finance union. He said to me, Becky, AI. And I was like, Brian, is there a follow-up to this? And he was like, no, not really. I'm just really scared of it. I'm scared of it for my members. I'm scared of it for my union. I'm just scared. And I was like, okay, well, we don't do the collective bargaining part. That's for your confederation. That's for your federation to deal with. Maybe come back another time. And then he came up to me later and he said, Becky, so our motion to Congress was on AI. And I'd like to admit to you that I actually wrote it using AI. And I said, that's very interesting. There's lots of implications for that one, both ethical and democratic around this. Shall we explore it to make it better in the future? And he said, yes, please. So we found that AI was being adopted by workers across trade unions across the world. And increasingly what we were finding is that not a lot of them were using it responsibly. So we were hearing stories of Brian using it to write motions. We were hearing stories of representatives using it to help them in their disciplinary and grievances with employers. We were hearing it being used to map workplaces where sensitive member information was being put into ChatGPT and being asked, how strong are we as a union? There was a list which increasingly my blood pressure was getting higher and higher and higher. So that's why we created the Centre for Responsible Trade Union AI. Fundamentally, what we're trying to do with this is to look at how can unions use it. So we're agnostic. We can see the perils of using AI, but we can also see the benefits. And really importantly, what we want to try to do is to get unions thinking about how can this technology, like any other technology that you will use, empower workers, build the power of the union, and use that power for influence and for good for the whole of workers and the movement. So we've been running a survey, which I'm going to give you all a link to later on, which we've been going around unions, trade union centres, as we've been doing training with those centres, but also just going out via all of our different networks and communications, looking at how are union staff using AI. So most staff fear that AI is going to do harm. And we've heard these stories across the piece. That's not unusual. Most are actually scared of the privacy and the data security of the information that they put in, except for a few who seem very happy to put it in. The loss of human touch. I think this is really interesting because I think in an increasingly individualized world, trade unions are the place where people can come for connection. And I think in the fireside chat before, they were talking about this recognition, this validation, this connection that we need from each other. I think trade unions have a big part to play in connecting workers with each other in an ever more fragmented world. I thought what was really interesting that in wider societal surveys and studies, 60% of workers are very scared about what AI will mean for their jobs, whereas trade union staff, only 21% thought that it would actually affect what they do. So I've got this quote up, which I'll read out for the translators, which was, I think the top 3 fears was missing a huge one. AI misuse by union staff and employees in general who are not trained to understand appropriate application and the use of AI, technical and ethical considerations. So basically people saying that they were frightened of us using AI. We also asked unions if they had any AI policies or any ethical guidance in place, and the vast majority of people either didn't know, which I think is quite worrying, or they had no policies or no plan for policies, or that they were in the process of putting one in. But as one confederation told me, they started the process of an AI policy in the summer of 2023, and they still haven't finished the negotiations on that. Meanwhile, their staff is using it. So far, no one in senior management has mentioned using AI, and long may that continue. I want to learn how to use AI so that I can stay relevant and keep my job when the senior management notice it. I can say as a senior manager, it's always really interesting when I have conversations with staff, and I was like, has everybody done the transparency slide on that? Yeah, no, Becky, we really haven't used AI for that bit of analysis. No, you have, because it's got American spelling in it, and we use British spelling in our work. But I think this is also a challenge, because we've got staff who are using AI, and some who are using it really proficiently and really, really well, some who are not using it at all, and some who are using it and hiding the fact they're going to use it. And if we're not careful, this will create a cultural divide within our unions. And then we also have, I'm not going to put every senior leader in the same room, but we're talking to trade unions and trade union centres about how they implement AI into their union, into their organisation, and we're having to have that conversation with senior leaders from the beginning on how to use a computer, and then how to use AI, and then how to think about using ethical guidance. So I'm going to just say this reflects all of the conversations I think we've been hearing throughout the whole of today, and I hope throughout the whole conference, which is that most trade unionists want to use AI to increase their productivity. And by increasing their productivity in terms of being able to stop doing small, repetitive tasks, they can spend more time with workers, they can spend more time doing a lot of thinking about the change that's going to happen for their particular workplaces. I was talking to a AI policy, trade union policy person, who complained that there was not enough being done around collective bargaining with employers on AI. And I said to him, but how confident are you that negotiators, organisers, industrial staff, representatives, how confident are they in AI full stop? Never mind then having to go and do a collective agreement on that. Until we have got everybody within the trade union movement comfortable with knowing what AI is and how it can be applied, if only for themselves, we'll be able to actually have effective collective agreements. Have you used AI for any of the following tasks? Well, a lot of people said never, which I always thought was quite interesting. But most trade unionists are using AI to develop texts, to transcribe, to summarise, research, analysis, and idea generation. So I have meetings with the general secretaries that I work with quite regularly, and I now just have a transcriber for every one of those meetings, because it helps. I don't have to take notes, and I can think, and we can just have a good conversation. And every so often, the conversation starts veering into something where I have to say to everyone in the room, shall I turn the transcriber off now? And everybody goes, yes, please, we don't want this wrong recorded. But it is really, really useful. And I do a lot of training across Europe, helping unions think about how they can better organise. I've been very recently to Madrid and to Croatia. I learned French and German at school. I didn't do Spanish. So I wrote my agenda in English. I used a translator to put everything in, said to my colleague, does this look right for Spanish? He was like, yes, looks fine. I was like, right, okay, off you go. Does anybody here speak Serbo-Croat? No, okay, we're going to use that so that everybody knows at least what the training's about when we go forward. So there is all of this stuff, but I have also said that you can't really replace having people doing direct translation. There's something about the way in which we talk that just gets missed, I think. What support do union staff want when thinking about AI? So most of them want to do some form of training or workshops, which is what we've heard before, and to hear from other unions. So this is something that we're trying to do more and more of, which is how can we train trade unionists, like the training of trade unionists by trade unionists on AI, and also how can we give people the practical examples and inspiration so they can go back. So hopefully we should be able, no?
Last week we launched the first ever global survey of union staff around their AI use, what they think of AI, what their experiences are of AI, what their hopes and concerns are around AI. We really want to understand what is happening in unions, because potentially a lot of usage of AI is secret and not being shared, and we need to know what people are doing so that we can better support them and have more open conversations, more honest conversations about AI and its impact on unions. So we've had about 60 responses so far, and I'm going to do some analysis to see what we're learning so far, and I thought I'd share the process with you.
Okay, so I've just sent a prompt to Claude AI. Claude is one of the AI assistants like ChatGPT. It's the one I prefer to use. I'll put the prompt in the comments and attach it to this post. So, firstly, what has it done? Okay, it started by creating a piece of one-off software just to do the analysis. You can see it in here. It's a piece of JavaScript code, and you can see it's all full of code, and it even calls in some specific libraries, some kind of pieces of external software to try and do the analysis. And now it's giving me some of the responses. So there were 57 responses in the CSV. It has connected the different responses using different countries. So UK, some people wrote England, some people wrote Scotland, some people wrote Northern Ireland. There were 30 respondents from that. When it connected that together, I didn't have to go through. It used its own knowledge to do that. Obviously Australia, Belgium and others. It can also connected different people who wrote different things in terms of their roles. So communication/digital. Some people just wrote digital, some people wrote communications. This decided to connect those into one group. Organising roles, including organisers and development officers, is another set of categories. It has connected together. It's done some analysis on AI experience levels. So of the people responding so far, 30% have said that they're at a standstill, and looking down the list, 19% that they're at a crawl stage. Whereas we have 30% at walk, 19% at run, and 2% at fly. It's giving me an overview of AI usage by task. So the most common task for trade union staff that have responded to the survey is text development. So they use it for text development. 49% said that they used it occasionally, 21% regularly use AI for text development, and 30% have never used AI for text. The second most common is transcription and translation. 56% have used AI for these tasks, 44% have never. Media creation is the least common. Only 25% have occasionally used AI to create media. So that's audio, visual, videos, and so on. So their hopes: union staff want productivity improvements, they want a better work-life balance, they want better union impact, stronger unions and more engaged members, and professional development. Their fears are consistent, and it's around job security, privacy and data security, biases, and the loss of the human touch. Some interesting segments it's picked out. 1, communications teams. It finds that they generally show higher adoption rates and are more likely to be in the run and walk category, and use AI for a more diverse set of things, whereas organising teams, more polarised. So you have some people with very little and some people with much more. Obviously most interested in member engagement, but with big concerns about human touch and relationship building. UK and Australian higher AI adoption rates, whereas European continental unions, so again it's bunched together all of the European continental countries, show a more cautious approach. Notable comments. I don't want AI in my work as I believe it replaces workers, and currently large language and data models use people's intellectual property and personal data without their consent. It's a very valid and very true statement. Another, opportunities. Multiple responses have highlighted the potential for stronger advocacy and better member engagement. And finally, on challenges, there's a significant concern about member data and confidentiality. Now, it has created a summary. It suggests a union movement that is actively engaging with AI, but doing so cautiously and thoughtfully, with clear awareness of both opportunities and risks.
But this survey only has 57 responses so far, and we need it to be much more representative of the entire union movement. So please click the link and fill in the survey for yourself. If you work in a union, we'd love to hear your views and your experience. We need to understand and get an honest, real take on what's happening with AI in unions. Thank you.
So after Nick had done that video, we got more responses, and I think we're now up to nearly 250, 300 union staff from across the world who have filled in that survey, which is really very interesting. I also want to give you an example of a live piece of work that I'm doing right now, which is I'm working with a small higher education union in Ireland to do their strategic review, and that has meant an awful lot of data collection and analysis and of thinking through what the future is going to be like for this particular union and for this particular sector and industry. And so in order to help us with that, we've done a couple of things. We created the survey that goes out to union members ourselves. We knew what we wanted to achieve. We've done this before. We're all experienced trade unionists. We know what works and what doesn't work. But there was quite a lot of questions in there that had what we call free text. So we wanted to get things in people's own words. We wanted to hear their sentiments. We wanted to know exactly what they think, feel, and do. And so for those pieces of information, instead of reading through the 400 survey responses that we got and tried to collate them and bring it all down, we put the answers into Claude and asked for a sentiment analysis, of which we got some really good information, and we had a conversation with the AI to help us to really dig deep into the information that we were getting. We were also really struggling to find accurate information on the Irish labour market, and in particular in the higher education sector. And so we went to the deep research on Gemini and asked it for more information. What else could it get? And could it help us to project into the future? Which again was really helpful and really interesting as a starting point for the research that we were doing, not the end point. And we did not take it for granted that it was telling us the truth. And lastly, one of the things I like to do with unions is to give them different scenarios of the future and to ask them which one do they want for their industry and for their workers. And sometimes that can be quite difficult to do and can take me an awful long time, an awful lot of thinking. And instead of spending 3 weeks developing the 4 scenarios for this particular union, I spent half a day talking to ChatGPT. Because it gave me things and it wasn't right. And so I kept going back to it and saying, yes, but what about this? What about this? I'm concerned about this. How about we add something in? And then it did something that I thought was really, really good fun. It said, shall I create a profile of a typical member in the next 5 years' time based on all this information? And I said, yes. Go ahead. I didn't think of that. Go ahead and do it. And actually it created a really lovely persona that I can use when talking to the union to show them the challenge that they will have in engaging, recruiting and representing a new type of precarious worker. And lastly, I want to finish with this example from Louisa, who is an industrial officer in a nurses' union who has been using ChatGPT, Copilot, which is contained within her union's systems to help her write a case plan.
Lisa, so looking at our survey results, text development is the main way that people say they've experimented with AI. More than 2/3 have tried using generative AI for this. You've been experimenting with helping writing case letters. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? What are you trying and why?
Yeah, so I do think I'm at the very beginning of my AI journey. So I'm starting with the basics. And one of the things that we have to do for every case is write a case plan letter, outlining our first conversation, what the plan is. I think probably other unions do the same thing. What I used to do is get my file note and go through that, changing member to you and going through all of these different things. But instead, what I've been able to do is put the template into Copilot, put in my file note, and it takes me about 3 minutes instead of about 20 minutes. So in terms of that efficiency, it's really helpful.
And one of the conversations we've had has been about sort of responsibility in doing that. So you've been quite clear about using Copilot for that. Why is that important?
So Copilot doesn't share any information outside of the organization, and it doesn't train itself on your conversations. So it's much more secure. But just to be on the safe side again, anyway, I never really put in member information. I just put in the member. So.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that comes up a lot in our training is this: how to be careful around data privacy. So that's quite a big saving, and I know that you're still in early days, but that sounds very, very impressive.
Thank you. So look, there are lots of different ways in which unions can use AI to help them grow for tomorrow, help them to be more effective, and more importantly, help them to be more powerful when it comes to representing for their workers and their members. And if you want to know anything more about this, we've set up a website which you can read in pretty much any language you like, which is quite handy. And what it does is it's constantly evolving, so it's becoming a library of tips and tricks on how unions are using AI. Lots of ideas on how unions are using AI. We're also training unions on a variety of different AI topics. So we've just finished with communication officers, and we're going to do some for industrial staff as well as the leadership work that we're doing. And we're also creating a database of AI tools. So instead of everybody, let me just explain that. So our whole thinking is, somebody's probably done it better somewhere else. So let's try and find that and share the best practice. And so what my colleague Nick, who you saw there, has done is he's created a community of AI ambassadors. Those are people within their union that are experimenting and using AI. And people are encouraged to put up what platforms and programs they're using and what has been working and what's not been working, which is really, really useful because, you know, when we've got all of this choice there, I think the best people to ask are fellow trade unionists and people who are doing the job. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for the invitation to come and see today. And hopefully we will see you all in the future.